Good morning or good afternoon, depending, I think for most of you, it's the afternoon. This is Steve and Cindy Crescenzo, and here's what we look like. You can see this on the camera, I guess. It's important to note that that picture of me was taken post-quarantine when I gained 175 pounds. So I don't look like that anymore.
It's not bad. Stop it.
Anyway, I'm Steve, and this is Cindy. We run
Hi, everybody.
We run Crescenzo Communications and have been doing so for 23 years. Cindy's been part of the operation for 15 years. She came out of the marketing world.
Yeah, I used to come from external marketing. I was the director of marketing for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. We're from Chicago. One of the best positions I've ever had, but what it helped me pay attention to is the importance of knowing your audience. So that is what we're going to talk about a little bit later in this presentation, give you some really great tips to pull together a strategy to make sure all of the case studies that Steve's about to show you is something that you can put into place wherever you work.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to take over for a little while here. And so Crescenzo Communications, as I said, we've been around for about 23 years, and we specialize in employee communications. And we have been lucky enough to go all over the world. There's Standard Chartered in London, Saudi Arabia. I worked for Saudi Aramco, McDonald's, 3M, Nokia over in Finland, Roche in Switzerland. You know, we've been all over the world, a lot of global clients. Yeah, we just go into companies and we do communication audits and we do communication training for the most part. And we usually do customized trainings where we'll build an entire workshop around your materials and your team and your needs. We also do complete audits, and we're doing them virtually now, which has been a huge success. Virtual focus groups, virtual executive interviews, looking at all your channels, your vehicles. So things are going well. And the one thing we know is that in the corporate world, we tend to create a lot of bad content. We tend to create a lot of jargon-filled content. We tend to create a lot of corporate nonsense. We tend to not be very transparent, and we tend to be very, very boring. And just by a show of hands, how many people out on this call right now have been bored by something that you're writing? Raise your hand.
Don't be shy.
Virtually. How many people have been bored? And now keep your hand up if you've been bored by something that you're writing as you're actually writing it. That's the world of corporate communication.
It happens.
Yeah, we're not writing sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We're not writing politics. We're writing about corporate initiatives. We're writing about safety and wellness and acquisitions and all that stuff is not that sexy. The problem is we have to make it interesting. We have to make the important interesting, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And here's why. You know, we deal with a lot of, Cindy's, I think, done 18 or 20 focus groups just in the last 2 months for our audits that we're working on. Talking to a ton of employees, and you know what? They are home now, a lot of them, and they are distracted, and they all have AD&D, not the ADHD, which is clinical, but they just got their kids at home now. They got their pets. They're working from home. They got all these choices. Here's all the choices they have other than looking at the corporate stuff that you're putting out. They got podcasts and online shopping and Facebook and drinking while you Facebook and LinkedIn and drinking while you LinkedIn. I'm also good at that. And I keep trying to add to this slide, and I just can't keep it up. There's stuff to add every day. There's so much stuff coming at people. So let's just take one look at this, one look at one of these choices. Now remember, your stuff has to fit in there somewhere. I mean, your stuff has to stand out. And if you're just churning out corporate stuff, it's not gonna. Just look at one example, apps. Martin was just talking about apps. And there's a million apps. There's a million fun apps. Our niece, who's
14,
16. Oh, Jesus. I thought she was 14.
She's 16.
16 just showed us this app where you take a picture of somebody, and if it's a woman, you can make that woman and see what she would look like as a man, and vice versa. So we did it for my wife, Cindy, who you can see sitting here. And look what she got.
Not bad.
I mean,
come on, guys.
Not bad.
Not bad at all.
Makes me question some things about how I identify because that is not bad looking man. And then we did it for my brother-in-law, and he turned into this like sexy biker chick. And then we did it for me. And here's what he did to me.
It's very appropriate. For so many reasons, this is so appropriate.
It's not showing through. Oh, you're not in there. Is that the actual presentation?
It's on a delay.
Oh. Well, that's me, and unfortunately, they turned me into a big fat baby. So you got all these fun apps, right? You got all these fun Facebook. You can be on Twitter. You can be on this and that. All these great choices. We could play around on this app for 6 hours, or in the corporate world, and we're still doing stuff that looks like this. Is there a big delay? We love in the corporate world, we love having people hold strange things. They're holding these strange brown things. And look at this guy's not very happy about it. This guy's way too happy about it, and he's holding it way low. And it's all these little brown things. They're all worshiping the big blue thing. But this is the kind of stuff that we do in the corporate world. We take terrible photos, and we're always asking people to hold strange things. We have them hold these brown things. I don't know what they are. We have them hold big checks. But look, that's just from a couple years ago. That's not from like 1950. It sounds like, looks like it is. But we have them hold big checks. We love to have them hold plaques. And if they don't have anything to hold, we usually just ask them to hold themselves and do what we call the soccer penalty kick, or the execution at dawn kick, execution at dawn photo. So we've got to get away from this stuff. And the reason for that is that we've done a lot of work in COVID. A lot of work. We're doing 4 communication audits right now, and they all happened post-COVID, so they're all being done virtually. And I'm telling you, COVID-19 is reshaping employee communications, and it's not going to go back to the old way. And how do I know this? Well, first of all, Edelman came out with the trust barometer, which I'm sure maybe somebody else showed today or will. And this was in March, but I think it's held pretty steady. Employee communication is the #1 source where employees want to get their information about the situation, about COVID, about the direction of the company, about everything. I mean, more so than government websites, more so than health company websites, traditional media. We killed social media, thank God. So what this is this is an incredible opportunity for employee communications. Incredible, but it's a double-edged sword. If we don't rise to the challenge, we're dead. We will never, I hate to sound like an opportunist that we have to take advantage of this horrible, horrible pandemic. But the truth of the matter is our companies need us. Our companies need us to step up and deliver the content that employees want and that leaders want them to have. And that's what today is about, is developing that content strategy. What are employees asking for these days? What do they want? What do leaders want? Well, we're going to share some of the results from our audits with you, and then also share just a bunch of best practices. But right now, never before have we been so needed and so important, and never before has it been so hard to do our jobs. We're at home, a lot of us. I'm having these crazy meetings with executives, as we do executive interviews as part of our audits. And I'm having these crazy meetings. The CEO just came in last week, and he was wearing like a T-shirt, and his hair was slicked back from his jog, and he was chugging water. I had a VP of Finance, VP of HR doing an interview with a grandkid on her lap. She was playing house mom that day. The conversations are more casual and less informal. One VP of Finance had to interrupt the call because his daughter's rabbit got out of the cage. Honest to God. So here I am with this important guy, and he's chasing a rabbit around the room.
What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? That's the world we live in. So I want to say, as I'm talking to all these executives, I probably talked to 35 or 40, and they were across all industries. Major healthcare facility, a very large technology corporation, global, a big university here in the States, and a federal government agency, one of the largest federal government agencies here in the States. So we work in all sectors. And all these quotes came from executives in all these sectors. And these are just a random sampling. They're all said the same thing. We've definitely become less formal in our communications. It will be hard to go back. I love hearing that. I've been pounding the head for 25 years trying to get people to be less corporate and more creative, and less stiff and formal and more conversational. I love this one. I think the new internet should not look like the corporate internet at all. We need to have more fun while being professional, more conversational, more human. These are leaders saying this. I really believe this has changed our culture forever in a good way. We need less of the long corporate stuff, more shorter pieces, more graphics, more visuals, more multimedia. I've been saying that for 20 years. More timely and relevant information. The approval process is getting shrunk because we got to get information out much faster than we ever did before. I think the days of just pushing information out to employees is over. They want to participate. That's what we're hearing from executives in all the industries. And what we're hearing from employees, while I'm doing those interviews, Cindy's doing a bunch of focus groups, 6, 7 people on a Zoom call, and just quickly say how well they're going.
I was really kind of nervous about it at first. I've been doing focus groups for way too long to mention. And, there was always kind of a standard that most people would feel a little bit edgy, a little bit self-conscious if they're put on video, if there's a camera in the room, especially internal groups versus external. That has switched. As you guys all know, this is the new norm where everybody gets on a camera. And I was pleasantly surprised at people's willingness to participate. It actually was easier because I wasn't asking people to get to a location. It's obviously a lot more convenient for your participants. And we're going to get into it in a little bit, but the things that employees are saying right now speak volumes to how important internal comms is today.
And they're basically asking for two kinds of information. They want concise and timely news about the crisis, about the business direction of the company. Is the company doing good? Am I going to have a job? Are we going to be laying off?
Are we going back to the office?
Yeah, are we growing? When are we going back?
Yep.
They want that timely, and concise. No long thumb-sucking lead-ins. No 2 paragraphs of corporate boilerplate before you get to the point. Get rid of all the jargon, the acronyms, the titles. They want quick news. And the other thing they want, though, because they're working from home and their whole ecosystem has been blown up, they don't get to go to work and see their friends. They don't get to go to the cafeteria. They don't get to go to the meetings. They want to hear from their employees and their leaders. And they are hungry for stories, hungry for news about other employees. They want human connections. So we need to do both of these kinds of content. We have to excel at both of them. So let's talk about the first one first, and that's concise and timely. By the way, neither one of these is easy to do. I mean, in the corporate world. It's hard to be concise and timely in the corporate world, but we have to be. And what this comes down to, I think, is you have to respect your audience. And when I say that, I mean two things. You have to respect their time and their intelligence. You respect their time by getting rid of all the excess corporate words and just get to the point. Get to the point, get to the point, get to the point. And you respect their intelligence by not loading it up with jargon and a bunch of, flim-flammery and a lot of puffery. And respect their time, respect their intelligence. These are intelligent human beings sitting at home scared to death. So respect their time and their intelligence. And the way to do that, I think, is to make the single right choice that you have to make in employee communications, which is what everybody screws up. We have to write for the reader, not the approver. What happens is, and when I've taught trainings from Boeing to McDonald's to Lockheed Martin to Nokia to Roche to all over the world, and really smart communicators develop bad habits.
Yeah.
They get kicked down by the approval process. They get beaten up by the approval process. The approval process sucks the soul out of them. And before you know it, they're starting to write for the approval. They're like, I don't care. I'll write what she wants me to write. She wants that long 3 paragraphs before we get to the news, talk about how great the company is. I'll give it to her. She wants to quote so-and-so, even though he has nothing to say, I'll do it because I just want to get this through the damn approval process. So we win that battle, and we lose our reader's attention, or our watcher's attention, or our listener's attention, whatever it might be. We have to write with the end user in mind. We have to respect the reader. And to do that for this sort of short, concise, timely information, again, there's news stories and then there's feature stories. Employees want both these days. This is the news story element, and it's a very quick formula. We have all of our clients use this formula. We've built entire newsletters on this formula. We've built intranet homepages on this formula. And it's very simple. What, so what, now what? What do they need to know? Why should they care? So what? And what do you want them to do? Now what? Here's the problem. We screw those things up constantly. We bury the what in a bunch of jargon and boilerplate. The benefits don't stand out at all, so people don't even know why they should be reading it. Mm-hmm. And then we don't tell them what we want them to do. We don't give them our marching orders. Let me show you an example of somebody who really got it right. And this is, obviously this is not a sexy looking thing. It's not a crazily well-designed thing. It's more of a news release more than anything else. It's from our electric utility here in Chicago, ComEd, and they sent out a notice to their customers. This is brilliant writing. It doesn't look like it when you first look at it, but it is because of the what, so what, now what. Look how fast it is. First of all, what's the what? Important. New leaders are coming soon to your neighborhood. That is a fantastic headline. So explanatory. You can't read that headline and say, what the hell are you talking about? Then look how fast they get into it. Within the next 45 days, ComEd will be upgrading the existing meter to your home with a new smart meter. Nice, fast first sentence. A smart meter will give you access to more information on your home's electricity use so you can make changes that can save you money on your electric bills. They put that in bold. There's your so what. So your what? We got new meters coming. So what? They're going to help you save money. Now what? Here's what to expect during installation, bullet points. Very short, very tight. You can skip, this is communication at a glance, which is what these ADD-addled, riddled employees want for certain kinds of information. They want to be able to glance, whether it's an infographic, whatever it might be, they want to be able to glance at something in about 30 seconds and get it. If they have to wade through, there's so many ways people could have screwed this up, and most people do. Like a lot of companies, instead of just saying, hey, within 45 days, we're going to be in your house with a meter, they would say, as part of our ongoing efforts to provide our customers with the most innovative and cutting-edge energy solutions, ComEd is proud to announce, we're always proud to announce, part of our ongoing, all these corporate words, that's written for the approver. Some marketers, some are, so wait a minute. We got to let them know that we have an ongoing effort here.
I don't think a marketer did it.
I think it's probably a marketer. A lot of bad writing comes from marketers. We got to let them know that we have an ongoing effort and that we're innovative and we have cutting edge solutions and we're proud to announce it. None of those matters. None of those words matter. Take them all out. Smart. We'll be in your house in 45 days with a new smart meter. It's going to help you save you money. Bam. That's what employees are craving these days. We're working for a client right now where the leader is such a good heart. And he wants to communicate during COVID. He's sending out 3-page emails. And cities doing focus groups, nobody's reading them. And the guy's a good guy. And they're not terribly written, they're just too long. They want short and sweet. They want what, so what, now what.
Real quick, Steve. So Melissa's asking, what if the approver gets the final say and isn't on your side of the ball there?
Melissa, that's a great question.
It's a great question.
We'll address it more.
God knows that happens everywhere.
Yeah, it happens all the time. I think that communicators are sometimes our own worst enemy. We don't stand up for ourselves. If the approver is an engineer or a lawyer, that doesn't make him a communicator. I think we need, we don't go into the accountant's office. I would never go to an engineer and say, hey, can I take a crack at those blueprints for that structural bridge you're building? Because I did some cool stuff with Lego when I was a kid. I built a whole Hobbit village. No. I think what has to happen is we have to fight for our words. We have to fight for our communications. And the bottom rule is we shouldn't even call it an approval process. We should call it a fact-checking process and establish the roles. My role is the tone, the words, the headline, the quotes, the length. I know how to do that because I'm trained in that. I'm skilled in that. Just because you took an English writing class in high school or middle school, whatever, doesn't make you a writer. So then you have to say, my role is creating the content. Your role is checking the facts. And you know what? It's a negotiation sometimes, but if you stand your ground, more often than not, and then another way to do it, which Cindy will talk about, is measure it. Do it their way and do it your way. See which one works.
You can't fight the numbers. If you're doing measurement correctly, you just can't fight it. It is what it is. So we're going to get to quick tips on measurement pretty soon, but just wanted to get your question in there. That's great.
Okay. Write a fast first sentence. So this is kind of a funny story. Intuit brought me out 3 years in a row to do a writing workshop. And when I do writing workshops, I customize them. So I ask them to send me in all their materials, press releases, intranet stories, email newsletters, leadership communications, multimedia, whatever, social media. And I build the workshop out of their materials, good and bad. I say, here's a great example. Here's where you need some work. They're very, very popular. Love doing them. Would love to come over to Europe and do them when I can, or we're doing them virtually. We're doing them virtually now.
That's right.
So I was out there, and I put this one up on the screen. And I said, so who's responsible for this one? And I heard somebody in the back of the room's head hit his desk. And he goes, oh, no. And it was a guy named Martin. And he was an actual former journalist and an excellent writer. I used about 8 of his pieces as good examples. But again, bad habits. Martin goes, I don't know what happened with that. It got away from me. The approval process really was bad for that one, Steve. Here's what whenever I show up a bad example, everyone always goes like this. Yeah, I can explain that. And they usually can. It's usually not our fault. But here's the whole tip here is write a fast first sentence. This is all one sentence. So first of all, look at the headline. Kneesbud. He starts with Kneesbud. It doesn't even say what that. Who the hell? You can't start with an acronym and then not explain it. Kneesbud, Intuit, to roll out financial literacy program for Indian Miasmas, whatever the hell that is. And then here is, I always tell all my writing coaches, when I coach people in writing, all my workshop people, read your stuff out loud. If your first sentence is so long that you're gasping for breath by the end of it, shorten it. If there are so many acronyms in your first sentence or your second sentence or the paragraph or whatever, and nobody can understand you, you got to fix it. So here's what he wrote as a first sentence. And again, remember, first sentences have to be fast. We have to get in there fast, give them a running start into the piece. This is a slog. The National Institute for Entrepreneurship and Small Business Development, Noida, he just throws a Noida in there, right here, Noida, and it's like a foreign language, Noida, a premier national level institution engaged in promotion of entrepreneurship and development of small businesses in the country through different interventions of training, research, consultancy, etc., under the auspices of the Ministry of Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprises, MISMA, Government of India, and Intuit, a leading provider of business and financial solutions for small and medium businesses, today announced that they have joined together to roll out a 4-hour module on financial literacy management for small businesses in the country. Well, I said to Martin, I'm going to give you 3 minutes to fix it. And I know you're a good enough writer, you can do it. It took him about a minute and a half. He wrote this. Intuit has joined forces with Indian business and government experts to offer entrepreneurs the critical financial skills they need to start, manage, and grow their small businesses. Later on, we talk about Neesbuds and Noidas and Neesmas and all the other crap. Get them into the piece quickly. That's what being concise is about. Write a fast first sentence. Another example, real quick about that. One of the things I love to do in when I do writing workshops is I love to go to the public site, the PR, usually it's a PR newsroom of some sort, and I like to find a press release that they did, and they're always pretty poorly written. And they're always patting the company on the back and their ongoing efforts and their continuous improvements and their shifting paradigms and all this other stuff. And then I like to see if a journalist actually picked it up and wrote it for the real world, not the corporate world. So here's one. I like the headline. Abbott, this was for Abbott Labs. I did a workshop with them. Abbott builds long-term commitment to China. Hey, at least the headline has a verb. That's, you can always tell a bad headline, they don't have a verb. Abbott builds long-term commitment in China. Then they start with today's announcement of, which I can't stand because the very press release itself is the announcement. We don't have to announce that we're announcing something. Just get to the point. But they say today's announcement of a proposed strategic alliance with Frontiera to develop dairy farms is the latest in a series of investment Abbott has made in China, comma, here we have the corporate boilerplate, deepening its commitment in the country. So I went out and saw if any journalists picked this up, and they did. The Chicago Tribune picked it up, but look at the sentence that they wrote. Instead of today's announcement of blah, 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 look what they wrote. Abbott Laboratories is getting into the dairy farming business. Bam! You're in. You're in, you got it. Even if you stop reading there, you know what the story's about. And then you can get into the background, the ongoing commitment to this and this and the other thing. But start fast. The other thing about being concise is you can't underestimate the power of a good graphic. Infographics are taking the world by storm. Not everything has to be written out in words. If there's a lot of data to do a story, you're better off with an infographic. There's all sorts of companies and websites that will do it for free, believe it or not. Yeah. Do you know any of their names? Remember any of their names?
I will look them up.
All right, we'll give them to you in the chat. Yeah. There's ones that do it for free. You give them all your information, and they give you choices. If you look at an example of how powerful they could be and how the good way and the bad way to do something. This is the bad way. Now, this is the same company who did it right and did it wrong, which is very interesting to me. This is a story about Workday, which is an HR tool basically, and every company's starting to adopt Workday. It's really popular. People, it's a big transition to it though. It's a big project. So this is what happens when you write content for the approver, because the approver is the manager, I'm sure, of the Workday program, and he said, my team worked so hard on this project. I want everybody in the photo. So gather all 50 people. And then hire a drone of some sort, or get a big ladder, or I don't know how you're going to get way up. I don't know what you're going to do, but you got to get everybody in the shot. Well, the only reason to take a photo of anybody, any person, is so you can see their face. I always tell people, take one step closer to the subject. You want to see their face. You can't even make out. It's like a sea of M&Ms. Like you can't see anything. And then, of course, they start with this is when you don't respect your reader's intelligence. As our vision for employee success evolves, we look forward to further expanding our use of Workday capabilities to fulfill our winning formula, empower, develop, perform, succeed. We blah, 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 blah. As our vision for employee success evolves, it's just too much. Nobody's going to read this. Nobody's going to look at the picture. Nobody's going to, because they can't recognize anybody. Nobody's going to read that long, thumb-sucking lead. Guess what else this company did, though? Instead of this, along with this, they did this. Same company, NJM, brilliant. Workday, the first 14 days. 99% are logged in, 36 had total logins, 359 emails, 272 calls, resource page visits. I mean, boom, you're in and out of here in 15 seconds, nobody gets hurt, and you're on the next thing. So the first piece of information is concise and timely. What, so what, now what? Write for the end user, respect their time, write a fast first sentence, take all the corporate boilerplate and jargon that the approver wants in there and put them down at the bottom where people don't have to get to it unless they want to. That's that part. That's the newsy part. The second type of information they are hungry for, they want their culture back. They want their employees. They want to see their coworkers. We have all sorts of fun things happening where people are having photo contests of people's workspaces. They're having Zoom happy hours where leaders pop in. They are taking pictures of pets that they're having to work with. I mean, people are hungry for stories about their coworkers and how they're thriving and surviving. Yeah. So that's where we come in. Our job is to make the important interesting. Again, whether that's safety or wellness or COVID or whatever it might be. And you don't do that by doing press release type writing. You don't do that by doing corporate style writing. You don't do that by saying in an ongoing effort to continually improve the blah, 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 blah. I love this slide. I took it from Facebook. No child will ever ask you to read them a press release at bedtime. They want you to tell them a story. So do your customers, so do your employees, so does the community, so do your leaders, so does everybody. People like stories. And what do you need to have a story? Usually a person, but we don't do that. In the corporate world, we write about these four things, what I call the 4 deadly Ps. Programs, policies, products, and procedures. Blah, 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 blah. They're all boring, but it doesn't have to be. A program, safety is a program. How that program saves lives isn't boring. A policy, how do we create that policy? How does that policy affect our workforce? That doesn't have to be boring. We have to write about these 4 things, and we should, but let's write about them from the point of view of a person. Forget about safety to program. Think about how safety affects lives. Forget about wellness as a policy, and think about how a guy lost 75 pounds and was able to start ballroom dancing again, a story I just saw recently. We got to find a person. So before I turn it over to Cindy, who's the brains of the outfit, I want to share with you one foolproof formula for getting people into your content for these longer stories. Now, again, Cindy's going to talk about prioritizing content, and there's going to be some stories you do what, so what, now what. But for your longer form pieces, where it might be multimedia, it might be a longer feature story. It might be a feature story with a video sidebar. It could be multi-channels. It could be a podcast. It could be anything. Here's how to get people in. This is for the written formula. And it's not rocket science. It's a formula that the Wall Street Journal has perfected. New York Times uses it. Every good, The Guardian does. I'm sure BBC does. It's the storytelling lead. The reason I like to teach it in my corporate writing workshops is because it is perfect for corporate stories. It is a perfect way to take a boring topic like safety, wellness, and initiative, whatever it might be, and make sure we pull people in with people. And the way to do it is, it's 4 paragraphs. And they're short, 1 to 2 sentence paragraphs. The first one, we meet somebody. We meet somebody. We meet a person. We might meet your cybersecurity expert. Second story is a little more detailed to continue the story. So paragraph 1 might be, meet Alina. She is in charge of our cybersecurity. Number 2, she comes in at 6 o'clock in the morning every morning and immediately starts catching things wrong. Number 3, a quote from her to complete the story. A really good, short, pithy quote, not a long, thumb-sucking corporate quote. And then 4 is the nut graph. What's the story really about? Well, October is National Cybersecurity Month, and we want you to be involved in it. But we don't start with the fact that it's Cybersecurity Month. We start with Alina. We give a little more detail. Then we give a great quote. And then we say, this is what the story is truly about. So here's how it worked in the Wall Street Journal. First of all, look at this fantastic headline. Prepared to die. Hong Kong protesters embrace hardcore tactics, challenge Beijing. Anytime you get not 1 but 2 great verbs into a headline, you win. I always tell all my writing workshops, become a verb nerd. Collect verbs and use them. Get rid of all your corporate verbs like impact and implement and facilitate and calendar. I mean, all those bad corporate verbs. Get rid of them. Use strong, visual, active verbs. So, prepare to die. Hong Kong protesters embrace hardcore tactics, challenge Beijing. The resistance, which has mainstream support, is the biggest rebellion against China's government since President Xi took power. So, here we go into our 4-step formula. Number 1, what happens? We meet somebody in a 2-sentence paragraph. In 2014, a protester named Chloe camped out on city streets, chanted slogans, and planted seeds of hope, part of a 79-day occupation of major roads. The protesters' demands for greater democracy were ignored. So we met Chloe. Paragraph 2, just as short, a little more detail, but not too much. This summer, the civil servant, who is in her 20s, has zip-tied metal barriers together to block roads and dug bricks out of sidewalks to throw at police. Her primary role is to be arrest support, ready to hire lawyers for detained protesters and help their families with an emergency plan. Paragraph 1, we meet Chloe. Paragraph 2, we learn that she's digging bricks out of sidewalks to throw at cops. Then paragraph 3 is a short quote by Chloe. Some of them are prepared to die for the moment, said Chloe. I am also willing to die for it. And then the 4th paragraph is what the story is really about. And that is the fact that these protests are vastly different than they were 2 years ago. This is your story. The story is about the difference in the protests. It's called your nut graph, which is a journalism term. But it's basically, this is your news lead. Hong Kong right here, that's your news lead. You could have started like this. Hong Kong's protests against the government's increasing reach are emerging as bigger. That's a news lead, and a pretty good one, to be honest. But I'm more fascinated by Chloe, this teenager who's whipping rocks at cops and zip-tying herself to things. That's what drew me in. Now maybe I'll read a little bit about the story. This works with corporate initiatives. This works with any kind of corporate story. Start with a person, and then back into what the topic's really about. And I'm going to show you one from the corporate world. This is my last example before I turn it over to Cindy. This was Boston Medical, one of our clients. Again, really, really good writers, and they did a series of stories on how their doctors are working internationally. And, first of all, the headline's bad. What's missing? The verb. There's no verb. No verb is a bad headline. Sustainable Services in Haiti. The story's about a woman who worked in Haiti. But then I thought, okay, we'll rewrite that headline. But then I saw the name right there. Oops. Tia James. And I thought, oh my God, they're going to start with a person. This is a corporate program story. The program's about how they're doing all this international work. But they're starting with a person. But then they screw up. They start with Tia James, and they do what I call the resume lead, where they have to list every single title she's ever owned. Tia James, MD, attending physician in the emergency department, vice president of mission, and associate chief medical officer, has her hands full at BMC, right there. You don't have to put anyone's title in the first sentence. Move the title down. Has her hands full at BMC, but has been making time to work internationally since she was a resident at the hospital. Initially, she wanted to better understand the cultural backgrounds that many of her patients brought with them to BMC, including the deep stigma of HIV in Haiti at the dawn of the AIDS epidemic. Kind of boring, And then, but guess what here? Down here in the second paragraph, where all the good stuff goes to die in the corporate world. When I was a resident, I had a patient from Haiti who had HIV, explains James. But when I told him the diagnosis, he insisted that he didn't have HIV, and that if he did, I gave it to him. Wow. I was shocked by this and realized it wasn't him. It was me, not him, that was causing it, and decided that I wanted to go to Haiti to learn more. Well, there you have it. It's all about structure. The content in there is good, but they just started wrong. Put in the 4-paragraph formula. Fast first sentence where we meet Tia. No titles, just Tia James still remembers the HIV patient from Haiti who accused her of giving him the virus. There's your first sentence. Second paragraph, a little more detail. She remembers it because it changed her life. Instead of being insulted, she decided to find out how we could think such a thing. Her questions took her to Haiti. Then a great quote from Tia, which I'm sure we could get from her, about her work in Haiti, short, pithy. And then the nut graph about how this is what her work is now, and it's all part of this bigger program at Boston Medical, where our doctors are out there doing great work internationally. That's how to get people into your stories with that simple formula. So the one thing that COVID is, I think, proving to all of us is that it's the end of corporate communications. We know it. For years and years, Cindy and I have been telling people, you got to take the corporate out of corporate communications and replace it with creative. And to get to, I think it was Michelle's question about, how do you do it? How do you convince leadership? How do you convince them to stop being so corporate and stiff and formal? That's where we turn it over to Cindy, who uses her marketing background to learn the audience, to do measurement, and to prove what works and what doesn't, so you can focus on the good stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve. As Steve mentioned, I've had the opportunity during this whole COVID outbreak to talk to employees firsthand in organizations of all sizes. And let me tell you, the number one sin of communicators is carrying out what Steve and I like to call the communication illusion. And this means, this is this mindset that people have that, I sent an all-staff email, I communicated it. I put it on SharePoint, I communicated it. I posted it in Teams, I communicated it. No, you didn't. What you did is you physically put a message or a piece of content somewhere. We don't know if we necessarily communicated it. As communicators, if we're going to be the best we can be and have the most influence on the behavior that we want to see, what we need to do is get to the root. Did people actually open it? Did they look at it? Did they understand it? Are we starting to see the behaviors we wanted to influence because of the content we're putting out there? That's when we know that we communicated. But until then, if you don't know any of those things, you are communicating under the communication illusion. And unfortunately, bad things happen when the communication illusion is in place. That's how we create all that bad content. It's because we're not thinking like marketers. I tell our internal communicators all the time, think like a marketer. You've got to put your audience at the core of everything you do. Because if you don't do that, that's how that formulaic corporate stale copy gets out there. And believe me, we still see so much of it out there. When the communication illusion is in place and we don't have a way to understand our audiences, we're frozen. We don't have the ammunition we need to go into that approver and say, well, look, I know that you want to do it this way, but let me show you what the data shows. Here's what works, here's what doesn't work when it comes to this audience segment. The minute that any communicator out there can say the words, instead of saying, I think we should do this, and instead say, the data shows we need to, you win. You absolutely win. You cannot argue with that. And that's what you need in your back pocket to kind of shift the way that people think of internal communications at your organization and try things differently. When you do that, you redefine your role. You stop becoming the Kinkos of your organization, putting together press releases, put together this slide deck, post this on the intranet. Instead, we become counselors. We become strategic counselors. Why? Because we know what works and what doesn't. We've tested things. We've tried things. We really go out and talk to our audiences to understand what's the hook. What do they really need to know? And believe me, if you're communicating under this communication illusion, you are sending out messages to your audience. And it is the most dreaded message of all, and that's, we don't care. We don't mean that, of course. Nobody means to say that to our audiences, but that's exactly what you're telling them. We don't care if this means nothing to you. We're just checking boxes and getting it out there. So this is what we definitely want to avoid. And I'm going to jump into a couple quick tools that you can literally put in place today if you actually have the energy when you get back to your desk. But you could use it tomorrow on any one of the pieces of content you're working on, and it will help you start to shift your way of communicating within your organization. It all comes down to one trick. The trick is to do less and do it better. This is something Steve and I say to every single communicator we talk to. We simply just send out too much stuff. We try to be one-size-fits-all communications and send it out to everyone. Time-wise, is that easier? Resources-wise, is that easier? Sure. But if we're going to be effective, we need to influence behavior in our organizations, and we'll fall flat if we don't do less and do it better. So again, just hammering home the importance of finding out what works and what doesn't work. Invest in the time and money it takes to do a communication audit, to really understand what channels are out there, what are people looking at, where are they at with certain major topics in our organization. This will allow you to cut out the fat, to figure out what we shouldn't be doing and what we should focus on, the things that really connect and what really matters. So it's all about cleaning house and communicating with purpose. How do we do this? Where do we start? You know, this isn't something you just flip a switch and just be completely different the next day. What we want to do is have a process in place to really help put our communications on a strategic track. And the way that you start out is you want to do what we call the foundation of every single communication strategy that we put together for our clients, and that's defining what your communication manifesto is. So many times we go into organizations, we work with other communicators. Our first question is, well, what are you guys trying to accomplish? What does success mean for you as a communicator at your organization? So many times we get the response, well, geez, no one's ever asked us that before. I don't know. We're constantly in this churn, this get out. This is what we've always done. We've got deadlines, deadlines, deadlines. No one ever stops, takes a moment, and just think to yourself, as a communicator of your organization, what are you trying to achieve? What would you consider successful? And that's what you want to use as the basis of your communication manifesto. And here's another formula to help you really define that manifesto. It doesn't have to be complicated, but you really want to focus on three main things. Number one, how is our communications going to help your employees understand your business or organization? How are you going to help employees no matter what they do? I had the opportunity to work for John Deere here in the States. They do farming equipment and a lot of farming technology. And it was so important. We worked really hard on making sure that everyone, from the person putting bolts on a tractor, to the people, to the scientists who were developing new technologies in crop science, everyone had to know how they connected to that mission. So once you do that, you've got their hearts, right? Then with their minds, they want to help make it more productive. So think about in your communication manifesto, how are our communications going to help our employees understand the business or our mission? The second way is that we got to drill down even deeper. It's not enough just to give them that feel-good feeling about what they do. People need specifics, and that's exactly what Steve was pointing out in a lot of his writing case studies. The more specific you can be and the less generic, again, get rid of all those corporate leverage words. They're horrible, horrible, horrible. Be specific so that every segment of your audience really understands how they individually connect. How do they contribute to success, whether they're an accountant or whether they're a subject matter expert in your area of your business. Everybody needs to know that specificity, how they contribute. And then
can I just jump in there? That's, again, what's so great about that anecdotal lead.
Yes.
You can start with a person. Let's say it's a project story and it was a successful project. Don't start with, we succeeded at the project. Start with, when John got to work last Thursday, bring people in with a person, and that's how you get individuals to understand how individuals contribute to the success. Sorry. That's
okay. It's a great point. It's how all this content hopefully ties together for you guys. And then finally, when you think about your communication manifesto, we have to understand, okay, how are we going to connect everything to business goals and organization? How are we going to make people understand the business that we're in? How are we going to help people understand those specifics of how they contribute to success of the organization? The third thing is so important now more than ever, since everybody is mostly working remotely. Organizations feel disjointed because maybe there are some people on site, some people are not. We need to help people connect now more than ever. It is crucial, and it's the number one thing for the organizations that we've worked with through COVID. Those that were doing the communications really, really well, being timely, getting stuff out, being transparent, those employees were so connected. They felt more connected now working from home than they did when they were in their offices. I hear that over and over again. But it really, truly is important. Internal communications is the backbone of your organization's culture, and we have the power to influence that in a positive way, and it's super exciting. So again, when you think about your communication manifesto, that's your first step in creating a solid strategy to shifting your role in your organization as a strategic counselor. You want to establish a manifesto that really helps define how you're going to achieve these three things. The second step, okay, so now we have the structure. Okay, how are we going to do this? We can have that structure in place, but as Steve has pointed out, if the content sucks, it sucks, right? It doesn't matter. We have to make sure that we're creating content that really hits a standard that we want to hit every single time that connects with this manifesto. We can't influence behavior if we're talking to everybody like a robot with corporate speak and not really understanding what specifics people need to know. We need specific guidelines. And this is a set of guidelines, and again, you guys will get a copy of this. This is literally what we use for every single person we work with as a foundation of editorial guidelines. If you can hit the mark in at least 3 of these things for every major piece of content that you're putting together, your content will sing. It's all about targeting your messaging, knowing your audience. We've already hammered that home. Focusing on people. It's exactly what Steve tried to illustrate a little bit earlier on how to turn those corporate, boring program policy topics to something that resonates with people by focusing on them. Conversational speak and not corporate speak. We like to tell everybody, you know what? Use your weekend words. Don't use those corporate words. Talk, create content how you speak. How would you talk to your colleagues? You don't use all these corporate terms in your everyday life. Why do we feel we need to turn that on when we walk into our office?
Yeah, you would never go home as a man and say to your spouse, honey,
Oh, God.
as we shift from the eating area to the sleeping area, we need to re-engineer your core competencies and shift some paradigms because I've got some low-hanging fruit issues. And if we're going to be a world-class, continuously improving family, we need to copulate more frequently. No. You go over and say, hey, honey, do you want to? Like everybody else. Use your weekend words.
This is why I drink so much, really. Sorry.
Use your weekend words. Nobody wants, you don't empower your kid to clean his room. You don't shift. Nobody wants you to shift their paradigm. They like their paradigms right where they're at. I apologize. I get a little passionate about this one.
Yeah, zip it.
All right, zipping it.
Make them important, interesting. Steve already explained that before, as well as include those powerful visuals. Need to be a foundation. Just go through your content and really think, how many times are we hitting the mark on the content that we're spending the most time, money, and resources on? Are we being as innovative with technology as we can, or are we falling into the trap of taking one piece of content and blanketing across everything we've got, not really thinking about the power of that channel? So this is a great guide for you to take back, and it's step 2 of getting a strategy in place that really helps drive your communications. The third is our most favorite exercise to do with people, and that's organize your content. Categorize it into 3 main buckets. We've already got our manifesto established, right? We already have our editorial guidelines in place. Now we really have a picture about what we need to focus on if we're going to be successful as communicators in our organization. When you've got that down, we encourage you to take a look at the content that you've created just in the last quarter. Just pull everything from a quarter and put it into 1 of 3 buckets, comparing it to your manifesto and your editorial guidelines. The first bucket is stuff that, holy cow, why are we doing this? And this happens for every organization that we work with. Stuff just gets dumped in our laps, and that's just the way we've always done it. And I don't know, this is how we do it. I don't know. I don't know how it got to us. I don't know why we're necessarily doing it. It exists for everybody. Take a look. There's tons of stuff out there that probably will not measure up or match up to your manifesto once you have that defined. Throw it in the pass bucket. Do not be afraid to do this, because when you do this, it frees up the time to do the stuff that matters.
And you might hurt some feelings. And you know what? That's okay.
Sorry.
Communicators have this crippling need, myself included, to be liked. Everybody wants to be liked, especially communicators, because we're not accountants. We're not bedwetters. We're nice people. We want to be liked, so we don't like to say no to anybody. And as a result, we end up being like the company Kinkos. We're the company copy shop. We just churn stuff out that, here, do this, I need this, I need this. We don't say no.
Right.
Well, if you have that manifesto in place with executive buy-in to it, then you can start filling up that bucket. Sorry.
The second bucket. The second bucket is we have to be realistic, right? Steve and I are communicators first before we became consultants. We've done your job. So being realistic, we know that there is stuff that we're not going to get rid of. As much as we want to chuck it into that pass bucket, we're not going to be able to. These are the things, those organizational announcements, housekeeping kind of things that people do need to know, operational announcements, things that people do need to know. It is important for employees to know, but you know what? We can't spend a ton of time on it. We need a quick and efficient way to get it out to our audiences so that the right people are seeing the information that they need. This is stuff goes into a bucket that we call the publish bucket. It's stuff we have to do, but let's get a process in place. Good example of how this works, how we're seeing this work is Modern intranets have areas throughout the internet where it's self-published, and it's like, look, we know that this is a very important thing for community outreach. People know the events that were in the community, ways you can volunteer. Instead of the communicators taking precious time to organize all that, collect it, get it out there, there are contacts within the organization that say, hey, if you want employees to know about it, here's where you post it on the internet. And people know where to go. It's a perfect way of getting that stuff somewhat off your plate, but making sure that you control the process so it's consistent and efficient for your audiences.
And this is the bucket where you use what, so what, now what.
Oh, exactly.
That's your formula right there. What, so what, now what. Just stick to it, and you'll get it. Instead of spending 20 minutes, streamline the approval process. Don't get caught up in that. What, so what, now what. Get it out the door so you can spend most of your time
on the final bucket, which is the most fun. And this is exactly what Steve has been trying to show you through those great case studies this morning or this afternoon for some of you, is that promote bucket. The promote bucket is the gold, right? It's the stuff that really strongly connects to our communication manifesto, the stuff we need to focus on to help employees understand the business, help them understand how they contribute to success, and help them to connect to each other. This is the promote bucket, and this is where we have the most fun. So we encourage you to do that. Establish your communication manifesto. Take a look at that foundation of the editorial guidelines and see how your content is measuring up. And then go ahead and clean house. Start throwing stuff in that pass bucket. We know everyone's doing stuff they shouldn't be out there. It happens. And then identify your published content and how you can quickly and efficiently get it out there, and write it using the what, so what, now what formula. And then our promote bucket. And I'm about to give you another tool to really blow that promote bucket out. And that is making sure that, okay, we're going to have more strategic content because we're going to have our manifesto in place. We're going to have more engaging content because we're going to put those editorial guidelines in place and really make that content sing. Make it, make sure that we're being creative. We're finding that hook and using our channels to their best ability. But the third element is measurement. You have to have this in place in order for your to understand, is it worth our time? Is this the right direction? To understand that we're sending the right messages to the right people. And here is a tool. It's one of our most popular tools that we teach that really helps bring everything together all in one place. And it's called the strategy ladder. The strategy ladder is a tool that is, I think it works because it's so simple. It's really meant to be a tool for communicators, knowing how busy you are, knowing how insane our lives can be. If this tool isn't straightforward and simple to use, you won't be able to use it.
Even though Cindy teaches this, I want you to know that I invented this.
No, he did not.
I did. I invented this.
Okay. So the strategy ladder works like this. You're going to take everything from that promote bucket, and you're going to think to yourself, okay, I'm going to overlay the strategy ladder and make sure from top to bottom I'm hitting every single rung. When you do that, we're going to make sure that A, our content is strategic, B, we have the messages in place and we know our audience and we're speaking directly to them, C, it's creative content. It's just not same old, same old. We're really thinking about our channels and the audience, the messages, and coming up with a way to tell that story in the best way possible. And then the final key is having a way to figure out, does it work or doesn't work? Is it something we should do going forward? Let's blow this out a little bit. Obviously, the business goal is self-explanatory. We're going to define how does this communication effort support the business goal that we're trying to achieve here. Then we want to drill down just a little bit further, and we want to say to ourselves, from a communication perspective, what are we trying to do? What is our goal as a communicator here? What behavior are we trying to influence? Are we trying to educate? Are we trying to motivate? Are we trying to get people to sign up for something? Are we trying to help contribute to a culture that is more transparent? Are we trying to encourage conversation in our workplace? Really define specifically, communication perspective, what are you trying to accomplish? And then we get to our audience. And I got to tell you, again, coming from the outside marketing world into the internal world, this is kind of where I've seen communicators, we're getting better, but I've seen over the years, we're falling down just a little bit. Too often, we like to just say, well, it's internal communications, it's employees. There are so many different segments that you should think about, especially when you're in your promote bucket, when it comes to that audience, so that you can make sure the content is relevant to anybody that you're sending it to. And here's another formula. When you get to the audience section, you want to ask yourself 3 questions. Who does your message affect? 9 times out of 10, we are sending stuff to people who don't need to see it. I can't tell you how many times I hear this in focus groups and I see it on surveys all the time. People say to themselves, why am I getting this? I don't even know who this is from. I hear that from a lot of the larger groups, larger organizations. Really ask yourself, does everyone really need to see this? If it really just affects a small subset of your employees, then just send it to them. Figure out how to just send it to them. But really ask yourself, who does your message affect? Second, what do they need? What do they need from this content? That's going to give you your hook. That's going to give you the reason why they're going to pay attention. This is going to be pretty much around the so what kind of mentality. Why are you sending this to me? You really need to define it ahead of time so that when you create the content, you're addressing those needs throughout. And then ask yourself, why do they need it? This is going to plug into your measurements. When you ask yourself, why do they need it? You'll start defining behaviors that you want to specifically influence. I want to put this together for my middle managers because I need them to communicate this down to the frontline employees and figure out what their questions are. That's the way you're going to measure it. You're going to find out from them then. Once we have that defined, we're going to go to those middle managers and say, okay, how did the communication go with it? It puts that added element of accountability. How did that communication go with your frontline employees? What stories, what questions did you hear? Did you have all the information you think you needed? So ask yourself those 3 questions in that audience rung, and you're going to make sure that your content is relevant to whoever you're sending it to. When you define your audience and you really think about them, you put yourself in their shoes, you know what to say. You know how to speak their language, and that's how the messages come into play. You'll drill down a little bit further, and this is where we have our fun. And 9 times out of 10, we will show really creative case studies in the corporate world, and we'll get asked, well, how did they convince people? Well, look, if you fill out the top 4 rungs of the strategy ladder, you've made a business case. You're not being creative just to be creative. You're not putting together a funny video just because you think it's funny. You have a business case with goals in mind and an audience in mind, and that's what will give you the green light. The final rung, again, measurement. You ask yourself when all of this is in place and before you send it out, what does success look like? And you want to make sure that you combine 2 things, metrics plus behavior. What metrics do we want to see based on what we've seen in other pieces of content? What is a good open rate, et cetera, et cetera. But more importantly, what behaviors do we want to see and how are we going to measure it? You follow this from top to bottom, your content will be gold. It's almost guaranteed. So we encourage you to take one thing you're working on and apply the strategy ladder to it. And we'd love to see it. I put our emails in that little chat thing. Send it our way. We'd love to see. It's one of the best ways that we get our case studies actually going forward. People send us examples of how they use the strategy ladder all the time, and we love it.
Yeah, and during our workshops, our customized workshops, where we actually work with your shop, we actually show 10 or 12 cases built off that strategy ladder that are measurable, that are creative, that are all sorts of fun. So we're going to end with this. There's no going back in corporate communication.
Thank God.
Thank God, because I was broken 25 years ago in the bad old days, and for years and years it didn't get better. But we are starting to see some changes. First of all, because of the COVID crisis, leadership is being held more accountable for being more available, transparent, and conversational. This whole corporate top-down thing isn't working, and the leaders I'm talking to are okay with that, but they absolutely need our help. They're not communicators. So we got to find, okay, John is perfect for a 1-minute video blog. Barbara is nuts. She can never see the light of day because she's crazy. Johnny over here, he's going to be great for a podcast. He's going to be good for a written blog. We've got to be talent scouts with our leaders and coach them to be more conversational, be more transparent. And you know what? They will appreciate it. Yep. I just did a review of a blog, a video blog for our CEO. And he did 3 blogs. The first 2 were awful, and I told him, as a consultant, you often have to go in and say to somebody, hey, your baby's ugly.
It's our job.
Hey, your newsletter sucks, your internet sucks, your leader blog sucks. I just say, Dave, Your first 2 blogs were terrible. You've got to be more conversational. He did the third one. It was about 1.5 minutes only. He did it sitting in his backyard with a mask on and a T-shirt, and it was great. And the employees loved it, all through coaching. Communicators, the pressure's on us. Our companies need us now more than ever. We got to take advantage of it, and it's a good thing. As long as we rise up to it, which we can,
Right.
it's a good thing. Employees and leaders are hungry for stories that showcase leaders are scared to death that their corporate cultures are going to get disintegrated because nobody's in the office anymore. And they're worried that the whole ecosystem, people are working at home and they forget that they're part of a bigger thing. And they're deathly scared of that. So we need to bring that culture to life still, even though everyone's at home. And the pace is accelerating. We're getting quicker. The approval processes are thinning down because employees want information quicker. COVID-19 has changed that. And what I'm seeing is leaders have adapted to that to say, you know what, it used to be, I will not send anything out until it is perfect, until I have all the answers. I can't look stupid.
Right.
My employees will lose confidence in me if I don't have every single answer. Now I'm hearing leaders go, I'm going to tell you what I know as soon as I know it. If I don't know it, I'm going to tell you I don't know it.
And the confidence levels are soaring. It's showing in all the surveys we're doing, in the focus groups.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's off the charts.
So it's a really, really great time to be doing what we're doing. And one last thing is we don't sell ourselves very much in our presentations, as you can tell, but we do need work. We would love to, we're sick of each other so bad. We've been quarantined for 8 months and I can't even stand it anymore. We got to get out or do something. We got to work.
Get us out of here.
So please reach out to us for a virtual audit, a customized workshop, training. We are here. We are available. We're fun to work with. It's just the 2 of us.
Yeah.
Cindy's got her drinking more under control now, so that's not an issue anymore. So we're hitting on all cylinders. So
absolutely,
reach out and
thank you so much for having us to the Voices group.
Yeah, thanks, Voices, Jessica and everybody else, and staff base.